Okay, hello and welcome to the Sunday lecture series and Two Chains. And a subject that I've been looking at, I first started to teach it in 1994, beginning the work of teaching the very basics, the very foundation of the nature of how human design operates. And I am looking forward to it. It's an interesting subject. We're going to look at two of the very, if I can get the illustration to come up. There we go. To really understand how it works, and that's really what the theme is of this class. I mean, to really understand how it works and to understand something else. To understand why it is essential to operate correctly, that is, to operate according to strategy and authority. But we'll get there. But we're here to look at the way in which we are actually programmed. And there are two things, first of all, that we have to deal with when we deal with any concept like this, how we are programmed. What is the programming agent? And how does it work? When I had my mystical experience now nearly 20 years ago, the foundation of the knowledge that was given to me was based on a subatomic particle. I didn't know it at the time, but in essence it really laid the foundation of what would be throughout human design's emergence, a step-by-step movement towards the fulfillment of this knowledge as a legitimate science, the science of differentiation. And as a science, the foundation of that science has to be something that is, well, legitimate. I can remember pondering the neutrino after that event and thinking about what I knew about the neutrino. What I knew about the neutrino, it was, it was speculation, basically. Dirac, it was, he was trying to solve an equation, and the equation didn't work, and so he made up something that would actually allow the equation to work. The thing he made up, he gave the name neutrino, the little neutral one. In 1987, the neutrino was a concept, and it was a concept that was lumped together in the basic binary of physics, that is quarks and leptons. The neutrino was part of leptons along with the electron. And so it had, theoretically, at least as far as the speculation was, it had no mass. It was simply energy. I was told differently. That is, I was told that the neutrino had mass. And any speculation about the neutrino having mass is rather awesome. Awesome in the sense of numbers. I mean, there isn't anything else that is more abundant than neutrinos. There isn't. I mean, there isn't anything else more abundant, at least anything else that, we have any knowledge of in any way. I mean, it is the most abundant thing that's out there in what I refer to as the biverse, what is commonly called the universe. I mean, the numbers are, they're mind-boggling. There's 3 trillion, that's 3 million neutrinos a second go through the space that you can form with your thumb and your forefinger. I mean, think about it. And think about the density of the neutrino ocean that we are in, because that's truly what it is. We are in an ocean of consciousness, the neutrino ocean. It's been imagined by many thinkers, dreamers, and prophets, this ocean of consciousness. It's been given a lot of different names. But the thing is that what we're dealing with is that we're dealing with something that is so extraordinarily abundant that if you could even imagine seeing it, and I don't know if you can imagine seeing it, but if you could imagine seeing it, in essence, there would be nothing to see. The density of this ocean is absolutely incredible. 3 million over all of those tiny little spaces, over all of the planet, all of the time. It's an ocean. And it's an ocean of information. It's interesting to think about our relationship with stars. They are the life giver. We are all, in essence, sun worshippers. It is our sun that is holy to us. It is the sun that gives us life. But all stars are suns. And all stars, in their function, in the way in which, in essence, they digest, that is a byproduct of their living process, they release the neutrino stream. Every star, every sun, throughout the totality of this vast biverse, they are all producing neutrinos, all of them, creating this ocean, literally this ocean of consciousness. When we talk about in human design analysis that 70% of what we are is rooted in the sun-earth binary, what we're really acknowledging in that is the overwhelming number of neutrinos we receive directly from our own sun. You know, the root of the significance and validity of the sun sign. How powerful that is, this sun, where you receive, where you, in that moment of the externalization of your life into this dimension, where you first meet this light, this force, and the information that streams from it into all of us. We are all programmed by the sun. All of us. It is, in that sense, more than just the life giver that warms the body. It is bringing us the consciousness field. It's streaming it at us. What is the potential of consciousness? At least 70% of it in this solar cell of ours. But we are always and constantly touched by every star in the sky, not just the sun. I mean, the neutrino is an incredible thing. Okay, so this is part one of our story. That is, part one of the story is that, I was told that neutrinos had mass, and lo and behold, 1996, under a mountain in Japan, that's what science proved. The neutrinos have mass. The proof, by the way, was accomplished by being able to see oscillation of neutrinos as they moved through the earth, evidence of them having mass. So now we have this dense ocean. Think about our limitation. Think about your limitation. We cannot see it. And it is everywhere and everything. It is as if we were inside of an ocean, truly. We just don't feel it as we wade our way through, swim our way through it. So we have a neutrino ocean that has mass. And then we have the second part of the story. And the second part of the story is the mystical part of the story. Because neutrinos are not mystical. Neutrinos are good old-fashioned, exoteric reality, as much as that means. The crystals. Now, the crystals are really something. According to the cosmology that I was given in the beginning, there were two. That is, in the beginning of what the physicists like to call the Big Bang. That moment of singularity when the two crystals of consciousness, the primary crystals of consciousness, meet each other in the void and shatter. It's perhaps one of the most extraordinary things to ponder in human design are these crystals of consciousness. We're each endowed with two of them. And of course, that's really our story. I mean, it's our story in the sense that we are a binary until we understand and accept and surrender to what that means. Only then are we really going to be complete and correct. The crystals of consciousness, each and every one of them a unique aspect of the whole, a unique aspect of the design, a unique aspect of the personality. And what is their function? The function is to filter. It's why they are given the name crystal. I mean, it is a metaphor for this function of filtering, unique filtering. You know, you take a crystal and you shatter it. And you take each of the shattered elements of that crystal and one by one you put a beam of light through it. What you're going to see at the other end is different. Each aspect, you know, like the drama of snowflakes, each one unique. Each shattered aspect unique. And we have two. The design crystal. The design crystal. This is the crystal of the vehicle. This is the consciousness crystal of the vehicle. In other words, that as it is programmed, that is, as it receives information from the consciousness ocean, the neutrino stream, that it translates this information uniquely, filters the stream, and ultimately expresses it. I mean, this is the way we're programmed. This is the way we're imprinted. This is the way it works. The neutrino stream. And when I say a neutrino stream, we are talking about very, very tiny things. I mean, we are talking about very, very tiny things. And this illustration is literally illustrating a stream that's made up of one neutrino after the other. One at a time, going through this crystal that is able, has probably, a width of maybe 3 or 4 neutrinos wide. We're talking about something very, very tiny. And we're talking about the impact of this neutrino moving through this crystal. Now remember, we don't feel the neutrino ocean or the stream penetrating us, do we now? It's something very interesting about the nature of physics and where physics stands today. It stands where, in fact, it's been for the last 40 years. It's caught in a dilemma. On one side, you have the magic of the surface and Einstein's relativity. The law of what appears to be reality. The relative reality that we experience. And on the other side is quantum. And quantum is about the way things work at a subatomic level. At a subatomic level. And what we are dealing with in this interaction here is that we are dealing with an interaction under the laws of quantum. The neutrino is a subatomic particle. And its interaction with the crystal is below the surface of what is relative. In other words, that's why we don't experience the neutrino stream, that it's operating at another level entirely, at a subatomic level. Think about how fast this little neutrino is traveling. About 98.5 to 99% of the speed of light. 185,000 miles a second. So it's maybe traveling at 175,000 miles a second. That's really fast. It's really fast. And the neutrino has mass at the quantum level. And the crystal is mass. And there's something that's going to happen because they're going to meet. Here is the story of the way in which we ultimately can do the kind of analysis that's available on the surface when you look at information that is there in a line and the color and the tone and the bass, and we have all of these things. All of these are ways of codifying frequency. This is all about frequency. It's about understanding what happens when this little one goes smashing into this crystal. And it does. And when it does so, there is an entry frequency. A frequency. It's one of my favorite mantras. Everything moves. Everything moves. Everything's round. Everything's spinning. It is all frequency. We are nothing but frequency. If you could look at us at the atomic level, it would be really spooky. We are just nothing but frequency. Oh, our frequency is dense, so dense that we perceive it as real, solid. It's all about frequency. And you see the neutrino stream as it hits the crystal, that this moment of contact, this is the entry frequency, and the frequency that is set off in this moment, this is what we call base. Now when we think about this crystal, it's important to understand that this crystal has 5 facets. These are the 5 different bases. There is 5 facets. And in essence, each of these facets have actually a different tone in the musical sense, if I can put it that way. I don't want to confuse you. That is the frequency that is created by this movement into this facet. You know, this may be the 5th bass, the 4th bass, the 3rd bass, the 2nd, the 1, whatever the case may be. But each of them have a different entry frequency. There are only 5 different entry frequencies depending on what facet, the neutrino is going through or being able to be received by. There's a better way of expressing that. So it is the frequency, this meeting point of the neutrino with the crystal, that sets off the foundation of how this information is going to be codified through the filtering process. The great mystery is here, in between, inside the crystal. The magic that in essence is going on in there. You see, when the neutrino is literally within the crystal, the moment it breaks the boundary and enters into the crystal, this is the domain of tone. And tone is the secret to life. I mean, for me, there is nothing more extraordinary in all of the knowledge of human design than to be able to understand tone. Because here is the architecture of cognition. Remember, these are consciousness crystals. Consciousness. They are here to filter the stream as consciousness. And what the tone does is that it configures that potential as a cognition potential, as a way of being able to be cognizant. When we get to the surface, we can translate tonal architecture into sensory perceptions, different sensory perceptions, visual, acoustics, olfactory. There are many of them, 7 in fact. It is this frequency, the inner frequency, that truly establishes what it is for us to be human. If you look at illustrations of tone, tone is always in a triangle that is the same as the body graph. There's no body graph inside. But it is symbolized by this triangle. In fact, it is symbolized by a triangle that is cut in half. And this zone in here represents the cognitive potential of what possibly can be the human. Possibly. But tone is inside. It is the inner architecture. And it is an architecture of cognition. In other words, we are being programmed to be conscious. We are being programmed to be conscious in certain ways. We are being programmed to be conscious through certain sensory apparatus. It's also a limitation. We do not see neutrinos. We do not see or hear or feel lots of things that in fact are existing simultaneously with us in dimensions that we are not equipped to perceive. So the architecture is for cognition. So we have this consciousness ocean penetrating a crystal that is designed to program cognition. Either program cognition as the way it emerges in the physical form. In other words, in our case, to be able to build a brain with a neocortex that can demonstrate self-reflected consciousness. Or as a personality, to be cognitive in specific ways, with one's self-reflected consciousness being the byproduct of one's sensory capacity. Everything about what it is to be alive, everything about what the plan is, what the meaning of life is, blah, 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 all that stuff. It's right here in the inner frequency. Because this is where the architecture is laid out. And what I mean by that is that the crystal itself, that is the facet itself, carries the thematic of that unique architecture. And unique is the word. Perhaps my deepest teaching to the other is that we are unique. And to grasp what that means, that we have a unique filtering system. That unique filtering system is giving us a very, very specific gift, whether in the form or in the personality. We're here to be cognizant. We are here to demonstrate cognition. This is what life is about. And it's all there in the tone. The tone is going to create architecturally the plans for what could be the fulfillment of the uniqueness. And the neutrino brings the capacity to do it. To move this tonal information, to move this inner architecture and turn it into a frequency. Because of the way the architecture is structured on the inside of the crystal, it will impact the way in which the frequency generated by the neutrino, the way that frequency is going to operate. That inner architecture becomes the unique design for cognition. And then we have the exit. And the exit is where everything becomes questionable. This is the zone of color. And at the moment that the neutrino breaks through the crystal boundary, in that instant, because we're talking about instants, there is an exit frequency. And this exit frequency is what we call color. And it is color that has the responsibility, if I can put it that way, to transmit all of this information, and to transmit this information to the magnetic monopole so that it can be part of what is the holistic whole of a being. And color literally is what drives us. At the personality level, we call color motivation, the driving force beneath the surface of the personality, pushing the personality. And on the design side, we call it determination, driving the body towards its uniqueness. Color is enormously important to us. And color is the bridge between the cognition potential that is there in the crystal, that perfect potential, like those magnificent architectural plans, and you dream about what the house or whatever it is will look like. We have all these wonderful dreams of the architecture in the tone. But will it get translated? Will the dream come alive in the life? And it is the bridge that carries the information, and the bridge can be easily distorted. Color can be distorted. And the distortion is never, ever about the way in which it comes out of the tone. The distortion is what can happen when it meets the monopole field, the monopole attractive field. Because the one thing about color is that it is not stable. It is why we give it the term transference. Color can always transfer. And when color transfers, a human being loses their potential for cognition. That is, they lose their potential for acute individual cognition. And they end up with a conditioned motivation or a conditioned determination running their lives. Color is not stable. When we look at transference is a very easy thing to think about. The first color will go to the 4, and the second will go to the 5, as an example, and the 3 will transfer to the 6, or vice versa, the 6 to the 3, the 5 to the 2, the 4 to the 1. It's standard transference. And when we're looking at these numbers, think about these numbers as simply different frequencies. And when you're looking at the harmonic, that is the 1, 4, the 2, 5, the 3, 6, when you're looking at the harmonic, think of it in terms of music and octaves. In other words, it's the same note, but it's played at a higher frequency or a lower frequency, depending on your perspective. Now what happens to color is that its frequency gets distorted to its harmony. In other words, either the frequency goes up in pitch, as an example, or goes down. But the fact is that what happens is that by the time the color gets to be an aspect of the life, and the way the life operates, the holistic illusion, instead of operating with the motivation or determination that is correct for you, you are operating through the transference, and you lose this gift. That is, you lose the potential of being able to turn the architecture into the life. So this is the first part of our story. The neutrino stream and the crystal of consciousness. And the relationship between the two and the frequencies, the three different frequencies that we call base, tone, and color. And then we move to the second part of the story. And here's the second part. And it's all about the monopole. The magnetic monopole sits in the G center, approximately in the sternum. You can see here, by the way, the original glyph that I was given when the monopole was first explained to me. What is the monopole? First of all, it's a monopole, and it's magnetic. So we know that it's a magnet that only attracts. At least that's the way we can understand it. As something that only attracts, that never repels. In essence, all of the monopoles in the totality hold the totality together, because in essence, as the evidence of universal expansion, that is, we've got an expanding, as the objects in space are expanding further and further away from each other, the monopoles are always trying to pull it back and pull them back together again. In other words, it's a counterbalance to the expansion of the universe. It's also the thing that holds you together, or holds me together, in the illusion of our separateness. It's probably the most, the monopole is a binary, and both aspects are intriguing. That is, it holds us together in the illusion of our separateness, and at the same time it aligns us to our geometry. That is, like the arms of a streetcar. It hooks us up to our specific geometry in this life. It is why we give it the name that is the nickname, if you will, of the driver. It is, in essence, the driver. But it's more than that. It's much more than that. Think about the beginning of the process. Think about the very beginning of life. Think about conception. At the very beginning, you got a design crystal with the magnetic monopole embedded in it. According to the cosmology, they were together from the beginning. And literally, when the design crystal shattered, that was the releasing of, the prime magnetic monopole, and ultimately all of the monopoles that are in existence that literally have a relationship with every design crystal, which means that the numbers are far beyond anything that imagination could even conceive. Monopole. And everything about illusion is held together by the monopole. Everything in the illusion is held together by the monopole. Okay, so what does that really mean? Let's think about it. When we start off at the very beginning of life, what do we have? We have the monopole, and we have the design crystal, and we have the two of them together. And we have the two of them together building the fetus. And in building that fetus, eventually getting to a point where, there is 88 degrees of the sun before birth, the personality crystal is called in by what? The monopole. And the monopole calls the personality crystal in and stuffs it into the back seat of the vehicle up there in the head center. And the movie begins. We enter into the life story. At the very beginning, when life begins, the monopole and design crystal separate from each other. The design crystal eventually, after first being in the throat, going up into the ajna, the monopole to the G center, to coordinate the illusion. Look at the body graph. Look at those two sets of data, the design, and the personality data. These are two very different things. They're 88 or 89 days apart in their calculation. They never have a direct connection to each other in any way that is informed. They operate very, very differently. They are two very different kinds of consciousness. What happens when the neutrino goes through the personality crystal? What you get is, I am. I think I am. I think this is what I am. I think the world is what I think. This is what you get when the crystal goes through there. And what happens when the crystal goes through the design? It keeps the movie going. You see, the personality crystal is really the odd man out. It is truly the passenger, which in essence is sort of like being a second-class citizen. The driver and the vehicle are in charge. This is a great cabal. They're in charge. And you see, the dysfunction in humanity is that for thousands of years we've allowed the personality to try to drive this machine. And it's not equipped for that. And you see, we're on the great cusp of a great change. And we're changing allegiance here. It's something that, in essence, human design brings. It cuts off the mind from being an authority. It returns the authority to the consciousness it belongs to, so that the vehicle can operate correctly, and that the passenger can learn to be a passenger and not try to drive, because it is not the driver. So how does it work? The magnetic monopole sits here and it puts out a frequency of attraction. And the main theme of its attraction is to attract the exiting frequencies of the crystals. It's its job. And it hooks into these exiting frequencies, the color. And when the monopole is hooked in, which is every moment and every breath of the life, the result is the whole illusion. In other words, the result is us, alive, moment by moment, breath by breath, in the illusion, because there is no gaps in this program, and it's taking place at 175,000, miles a second, and there's this constant zzz, 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 zzz. And it's actually going down this way. There's all this information that's just pouring through. And it's the monopole that's holding this together. But there's something that happens. This is operating at a level in which we are dealing with an illusion that's being created. The monopole is holding together these two aspects in an illusion that we call ourselves. And then the illusion, which is created by holding it together, then becomes the influencer of the attraction frequency. Think about that, because that's very important. You've got an attraction frequency. But that's not where it ends. What you're attracting is you're holding together an illusion. And the illusion itself is a frequency, the byproduct of these two capturings. But if the illusion is not functioning correctly, then the overall frequency of the whole being is distorted. And then the capturing is impacted, and guess what? Transference takes place. And you have deep dysfunction. deep dysfunction in the not-self. See, once we're alive, there is only one way that we can return to what is our natural frequency. I mean, that is the gift of this knowledge. You return to that natural frequency by giving inner authority, that is decision-making authority, to your design, to the vehicle, to the real cabal that rules the life, the monopole in the design. And it's only then that you begin to enter into the possibility of what can be the awareness experience of the personality and the passenger, once it is no longer absorbed with making decisions, but more than that, the moment that the capture frequency is correct is the moment that you get the cognition. This is the whole thing to grasp. It's why the not-self is so dense. Dense. It's why, if you did a survey of 100,000 couples, they probably all have very similar things that they like and dislike about the other. It's all homogenized. There is no differentiation. There is no unique cognitive force. There is simply the byproduct of conditioning and transference, so that nobody is operating according to what is correct for them in terms of what is a correct motivation or determination. And the secret to what it is for us to be transcendent is buried deep within this process, deep inside of the mystery of the crystal itself. There's our magic. There's our gift. I mean, the beauty that we have in the experience of this is the second year I'm teaching PHS in rave psychology, is that we have a very good language of being able to describe these frequencies. And of course, when we start describing these frequencies, we end up in the titling of this lecture. We're dealing with chains. And the moment that you're not operating correctly, the chain is broken. And the chain is broken because the reception frequency is distorted, because the holistic illusion, us, is not operating correctly. It's just like that. It's why over and over and over again, and I mean over and over and over again, I remind everyone who has any connection to this knowledge that it's all about strategy and authority, because that is the basis of it, and you can see it here mechanically. In other words, you can understand the principle of what happens and why it's so important to stop the distortion. Because if you don't stop the distortion, you don't get the cognition. Think about what the tone does on the design side. If we're talking about the 70% of the design crystal, being the information that it's getting from the sun, 70% feed. And when we look at the sun, earth on the design side, we're looking at it, what is called internal determination. There's two kinds of determination, internal and external. External is related to the nodes. The sun, earth represents internal determination. And internal determination, this is about being able to perfect what is in fact the digestive process in order, as a byproduct, to be able to enhance a unique sensory function of the brain itself. I mean, think about the nature of homogenization of the brain. When a human infant comes into the world, it's set on a timetable, and the timetable is basically 3 years. It gets 3 years to build the neural tracts in its brain. 3 years. That's not a lot of time. And at the end of the 3 years, any of the tracks that were opened that haven't been correspondingly used enough, will be shut down as well. And that is the limitation of the neural infrastructure for that child right through the rest of its life. Think about that. They have discovered, for example, that in children that have extraordinarily high IQs, that the neural growth continues until they're about 5, and then it shuts down. Now, there's no reason for them to shut down at 5 or to shut down at 3. That is, there's no scientific reason. It's that old joke that you always heard, at least I did when I was in high school, why don't we use the other 95% of our brain? Interesting question. The fact is that we are all conditioned from the moment we come into the world. We are all conditioned and homogenized, and we are homogenized in the way we are educated, in the way in which we are conditioned by our societies and so forth and so on and blah, blah, blah. And the unique potential of cognition inherent in all of us never gets a chance to start, ever gets a chance to start. It doesn't. What you get is human beings coming into the world who are automatically transferred, who are automatically not self, and who are automatically going to operate through incorrect motivation. They are not going to operate correctly in terms of their body. They're going to have problems with their digestive system, and the problems with the digestive system, because it's not attuned to what is absolutely correct for them, is that the end result of that is the homogenization of the brain's potential. By the time the child's 3 and has gone through the feeding regimen that is part of its culture, by the time it's 3 years old, all of the potential of its brain is shut down. Now, one of the things that's clear to me is at the moment that you are operating correctly from the design perspective, that is strategy and authority, this information and the way it's going to be received is that it's going to be correct. And what that means is that you begin a process not simply of healing the body. And obviously this is related to PHS, and there are diet regimens that are involved. But the fact is that what it does represent is the potential of opening up, not all, but opening up specifically where one's sensory direction is, opening up neural tracts and opening up neural tracts, that have been dormant, that have been atrophying. All of this results in the potential in the architecture of cognition to actually get to the surface. In other words, to actually become part of the brain pan, the way the physical hardware operates. It is so logical to recognize that if the hardware is limited, then no matter what can come out of it is going to be limited. If you have a brain that's damaged, it doesn't matter what the potential of your crystal is. By the time it gets to the surface, because there is physical damage, it is going to be distorted or non-existent. We are all about hardware. We like to think of mind without thinking about hardware. That's very cute, but nonetheless, we can't. It's a byproduct of the hardware. And if the hardware is upgraded, if the hardware is more sophisticated, then it offers new opportunities and new potentials to the self-reflected consciousness to display its possibility. That's what we have on the other side. Transference is something that's very, very difficult at the personality level. It's easily dealt with at the design level through strategy and authority. But personalities, the passenger, needs to learn in order to transcend. And transference is a common companion of the personality. But recognize that if the personality can be correct, the byproduct of that, in other words, the architectural cognition, its unique theme of cognition, what is in fact a literal map that moves through the chain, and the potential of that personality to be able to utilize its intellectual capacity as an outer authority, as an outer unique authority for others. Frequencies. It's all frequency. Bass, tone, color, to the line, to the illusion. that the illusion itself is a frequency. It's a vibration. It's an intense auric, magnetic, dense field. All frequency. And basically what you're doing when you're aligning yourself to your design and your design consciousness, it's like a tuning fork. You're tuning your frequency. You're cutting out the distortions that come from mind. And the moment you cut away those distortions, the moment you operate correctly, it's not just about the surface that you see, that is offered from human design on the surface that says to you, take the burden off your shoulders and, it makes your life easier. You begin to see how things work. Please understand, this is a much, much deeper process that's at work. Strategy and authority for your vehicle, for your brain, for the way in which you use energy, for your vitality, for your overall well-being. And that the only way that you get there is not that there's a problem in the color. There's no problems in here. This is perfect. Absolutely perfect. It's just an instrument. Perfect. What's imperfect is this field of connection. And it's dependent on the frequency of the whole. This is why strategy and authority works. This is why. The other thing is to understand that it's the monopole that creates type. The monopole, in its attractive force that holds us together in the illusion of our separateness, is also responsible for the way in which our aura works. And our aura is a reflection of our type. The monopole is an extraordinary thing. Sitting there in the core, the driver. If you want to experience the beauty of all of this mechanism operating correctly, it's actually quite easy. You just give up making decisions with your mind, It's just that easy. It may not be simple, but it's just that easy. You can use your mind, nothing wrong with it. You can ponder and reflect. You can muse. You can churn things over. You can measure. You can weigh. You can reference. You can meditate. I don't care what you do with it. Doesn't matter. It's entertainment after all. As long as you don't make a decision with it. Because you can see what the ramifications are. You're here to be programmed in your perfection. You're here to experience the full potential of these consciousness crystals that are in you. You're here to experience this unusual binary process. The illusion of this life. The potential perfection of this life. No decisions with the mind. There is no other way to get there because there is no other way to change the capture frequency. It's the whole point. And if the capture frequency isn't correct, you don't get the cognition. And that's what we're here for. How many people do the same work on this world? You ever thought about that? How many people call themselves this or that? Carpenter, plumber. We have this incredible homogenized world. People call themselves this and that. There's a limited spectrum. It's mostly redundant. There are very few true trains of thought that are universal. What we have is a lot of propaganda. We live in a homogenized world. We live in a world of the not-self. We live in a world in which the capture frequencies are distorted. A world in which cognition is limited. A world in which babies have their neural system shut down at 3. This is our world. And 50% of those beings are open emotionally and they avoid the truth like poison. And the rest are too busy going up and down to notice. It's like the article on the front page of the newspaper yesterday that said that if the world's fishing nations don't stop their literal raping of the oceans by 2048, there will be no more fish. And I look at the not-self. And I look at this not-self planet. And I look at all of those not-self politicians and all of those not-self fishermen and all of those not-self fishing communities and all of those not-self boat manufacturers and all of those, and it goes on and on and on. And you know what's going to happen. We're going to run out of fish. It's the not-self world. If you want to escape that, because you can, well, you have to see that here is where it is. This is the way it works. The information is there. But whether we can receive it, whether we can capture it, whether we can fulfill the promise that is rooted in the architecture, it's our frequency that matters. And if the frequency is distorted, you just don't get there. You don't. Today is an opportunity to really remind you of these two basic things that are at the foundation of human design. That we are part of a programming agency. That each of us has the potential of demonstrating a unique filtering of the consciousness field. And yet each of us, given the circumstances of education and knowledge at the time of our coming into the world, that each and every one of us have gone into deep conditioning states in which the frequency of our being cut off the possibility of our fulfillment of purpose. And all of that can be reclaimed. All of it. Stop making decisions with your mind. Honor what is your strategy and authority. And then this, magical work that goes on in here, this will bring in the cognition and it'll allow you that possibility, that extraordinary possibility of understanding what it means to live as yourself in this life and to truly be your own authority. To be able to establish what is the basis of a life upon which you and you alone are the true authority.